Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where we discuss leading political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And we begin with a few quick updates on the massive Hong Kong fire the world has been watching these last few days. The city, of course, is reeling from its deadliest blaze in decades after a massive fire tore through a city-rise public housing estate on Wednesday, igniting widespread public anger over long-standing safety lapses and the use of flammable construction materials across the territory. By Friday morning, local time, the death toll had surged to 94, with more than 200 residents still unaccounted for. Another 76 people have been reported injured. The fire, which rapidly engulfed 7 of the 8 residential towers at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po District, has exploded into a political scandal and has raised urgent questions about how such a catastrophic spread could occur in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, a city famed for dense vertical housing. Hong Kong's Independent Commission Against Corruption announced yesterday that it has opened an investigation into renovation works at the estate, after reports indicated that some materials used on the building's exteriors may have violated fire safety standards. Officials said protective netting, waterproof tarpaulins, and plastic sheeting attached to the facade may not have been compliant with fire-resistant requirements. Residents and firefighters also pointed to bamboo scaffolding, widely used in Hong Kong construction, as a possible accelerant that helped the flames climb rapidly up multiple towers. Police have arrested 3 construction company executives on suspicion of manslaughter linked to the renovation project. The scale of the destruction has fueled public anger, spiraling into a political crisis, with survivors calling the disaster preventable. Chief Executive John Lee has ordered an immediate inspection of all major renovation works underway across public housing estates. Firefighters said they hope to complete checks of the remaining flats today, though uncertainty remains over how many residents were inside the complex when the inferno broke out. According to the latest census data, Wang Fuk Court housed roughly 4,600 people. As investigators sift through footage and debris to determine the fire's origin, the tragedy has intensified scrutiny of Hong Kong's construction practices and whether long-ignored risks have finally caught up with the city's skyline. Next, we cover salient updates in the ongoing Japan-China diplomatic crisis, which we've been following closely. Tensions between Japan and China escalated sharply this week, deepening a diplomatic crisis now entering its 3rd week. What began with Prime Minister Takaichi's unusually explicit remarks linking Japan's security to a Taiwan contingency has spiraled into a multi-front confrontation, stretching from the United Nations and global aviation to US diplomacy and intense military signaling. The diplomatic clash moved to the world stage after Beijing sent a letter to UN Secretary-General accusing Takaichi of violating international law. In recent days, Tokyo responded in kind. Japan not only sent its own sharply worded letter to the UN, but also requested it be circulated as an official General Assembly document, a sign of unusual assertiveness for Japanese diplomacy. One paragraph in particular stood out and will likely not make many friends in Beijing. Quote, "Regrettably, in the contemporary world, certain countries have been engaged in the prolonged expansion of military capabilities in a non-transparent manner, and continue to attempt unilateral changes to the status quo by force or coercion." End quote. The implications were unmistakable. Chinese analysts immediately took note, with Peking University's Jia Daojiong warning of a persistent campaign to reinterpret UN Resolution 2758, a move Beijing views as part of a broader international effort to dilute its so-called One China principle. Full disclosure, Professor Jia was one of my professors when I did my master's degree at Peking University. We on several occasions exchanged disagreements. Against this backdrop, China's UN envoy Fu Cong doubled down, framing Tokyo's letter as further evidence of Japan's attempt to, quote, internationalize, end quote, what Beijing considers an internal matter. Multiple signs suggest Beijing is preparing for a protracted confrontation. According to US-based Bloomberg, China's aviation regulator has instructed domestic airlines to maintain sharply reduced flights to Japan through March of 2026. Airlines were told the restrictions are, quote, for now, end quote, implying they could change with diplomatic developments. But the timeline stretching into the new year, including China's Chunjie, or Spring Festival, when many travel, reflects Beijing's expectation of long-term friction. Complicating matters further, an exclusive Wall Street Journal report published today offered rare insight into the private diplomacy playing out behind the scenes. It reports, citing unnamed senior sources sources that in an hour-long phone call with President Trump, General Secretary Xi Jinping devoted nearly half of the conversation to Taiwan, emphasizing its centrality to the, quote, post-war international order, end quote. Hours later, Trump called Takaichi and, according to US sources speaking to the outlet, advised her not to provoke Beijing. Japanese officials deny such advice was given. Publicly, Washington has expressed strong support for its ally in Asia, Japan. The Wall Street Journal reports that behind the scenes, Tokyo was unsettled by the sequencing, a call to Xi first, then to Japan, a symbolic reminder that Washington's newly repaired trade detente with China risks overshadowing allied coordination on Taiwan. Analysts argue this represents a new reality. The issues of Taiwan and US-China trade have become intertwined, with Beijing leveraging economic cooperation to influence American diplomacy. Other commentators push back, arguing that there is insufficient evidence to make such a claim, and there is nothing particularly controversial in a US leader privately asking an ally to cool its language somewhat. We also note that in the economic competition, while China does have leverage in areas like rare earths, overall the US is still in the stronger position. Meanwhile, China's rhetoric has grown fiercer by the day. Yesterday, Thursday, the People's Liberation Army warned Japan would pay a, quote, painful price, end quote, if it, quote, crossed the line even half a step, end quote, on Taiwan. A Chinese military spokesperson revived historical grievances, accusing Tokyo of failing to reflect on its colonial rule over the island from 1895 to 1945. Public polling for decades has indicated that Taiwanese have fairly positive views of Japan, considering that by the late 19th century, Taiwan itself emerged after over a century of Chinese settler colonialism. Also, that the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894, which resulted in the handover of Taiwan from the Chinese Qing Empire to the Empire of Japan, was a conflict of imperial expansion started by Chinese aggression, and in light of this current diplomatic crisis over Beijing defending what it believes is its right to take Taiwan by military force against the will of its current inhabitants, perhaps Japan isn't the one most in need to reflect on its imperial and colonial legacy. Meanwhile, top diplomat Wang Yi used a call with France's presidential advisor yesterday to rally support, urging Paris to, quote, firmly abide by the One China principle, end quote, and labeling Takaichi's remarks as, quote, serious provocation. End quote. Beijing is seeking to internationalize its pressure campaign, not only to isolate Tokyo, but to deter G7 countries from backing Japan's stance. For her part, Takaichi has neither retracted her remarks nor softened Japan's security position. She insists her comments reflected long-standing Japanese policy. With planned missile deployments on Yonaguni moving ahead and cross-strait military activity intensifying, the region appears headed into a period of sustained volatility. The crisis has laid bare the fragility of East Asia's strategic balance, where trade, security, and great power rivalry are increasingly inseparable. Now, if you want to continue to be on top of all things China as we move into this new period of uncertainty and danger, consider subscribing to China Update, hit the bell notification icon, and you will be. If you're getting some value from today's episode, it's a huge help if you can just hit that like button, and Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description for those who want to go the extra mile and help keep the channel financially sustainable. As always, every part of making this channel is on me. I am a one-man team, and I rely primarily on the audience's support to keep going and to continue making these episodes most days of the week, open and free for all. So this is a tremendous form of support too. Thank you so much, everyone, for all the incredible support. And finally for today, China's leading technology companies are increasingly training their most advanced artificial intelligence models in overseas data centers to secure access to NVIDIA chips and sidestep US efforts to slow their progress. Alibaba and ByteDance are among the groups developing their latest large language models, LLMs, in facilities across Southeast Asia, particularly Singapore and Malaysia. Two people with direct knowledge of the operations reportedly told UK-based The Financial Times that the shift accelerated after Washington tightened restrictions in April on NVIDIA's H20 chips, which were specifically designed for the Chinese market. Quote, it's an obvious choice to come here, end quote, said a Singapore-based data center operator, adding, quote, you need the best chips to train the most cutting-edge models, and it's all legally compliant, end quote. Over the past year, Alibaba's Qwen and ByteDance's Doubao have emerged as top-performing global LLMs. Qwen in particular has gained international traction thanks to its open-source availability. Their training has helped fuel a boom in high-performance data center clusters across Singapore and Malaysia, many of which host NVIDIA's most powerful processors, the same class used by US technology giants. Industry insiders said Chinese companies typically lease compute from foreign-owned data centers, a structure that remains compliant with US export controls. The Biden-era so-called diffusion rule, designed to close this leasing loophole, was scrapped earlier this year by the Trump administration. One major exception is DeepSeek, which trains domestically after stockpiling NVIDIA chips before export bans took effect. The company is also collaborating closely with Huawei to optimize emerging Chinese AI chips. Huawei has deployed engineers to DeepSeek's Hangzhou headquarters as part of a broader push to advance China's semiconductor and AI software ecosystem. While these reports are difficult to independently verify, I can say that I have personally visited these sites in Hangzhou and can verify their accuracy. While training models demand immense computing power, an area where NVIDIA still dominates, Chinese firms increasingly rely on domestic chips for inference, which accounts for a growing share of AI workloads. Beyond training, Southeast Asian data centers allow Alibaba, ByteDance, and others to serve overseas clients as they expand their global cloud computing businesses. However, strict rules prevent Chinese companies from moving domestic private data offshore, meaning client-specific model customization must still occur within China. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. There may be an extra episode tomorrow. This hasn't been confirmed yet, however. Thank you for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I hope to see you for the next episode of China Update, either tomorrow or for a new week on Monday.